Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm 𝐢𝐭'𝐬𝐬. I'm a self-care strategist for female entrepreneurs. I specialize in systems that transform daily stress and constant overwhelm into clarity and calm, while also creating that space for personal fulfillment. Today, I want to talk about the physical price of emotional burnout because there really is an actual link between the two. There are differences, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but I wanted to really talk about how emotional stress really just isn't just in your body, in your mind, I should say, but it actually is manifesting a lot of the time physically. Our bodies, they react in ways that reflect our internal stress. Like for me, for example, if you've been watching me for a while, I've shared my story of I shared, especially a couple of weeks ago, I shared my own personal story. And for me, it was around when I was in my early 20s, one of my first realizations that I was actually having a burnout phase. I didn't understand it at the time. I just felt that I was going into some panic attacks, and then I was having other things physically manifesting themselves in my body. And I experienced that, and it was because of my stress. And I didn't recognize that my stress was the issue to all of the physical symptoms of the hives that started to happen to me just out of the blue. I'd never had that happen before, all over my face, my arms, my hands, my neck, everywhere. They would just pop up. And so I didn't even recognize at that time what was happening to me is that I was in what I call the onset of stress, and then also the other was really like chronic stress and burnout. That's really where I found myself, and I didn't know that that's where I was, because again, self-development really wasn't on my radar, and I didn't really recognize it. But now that I've been doing this now for the past, wow, it's since 2017 when I really started leaning into self-development, but really more so in 2018 when I had the time and the space to do that, is when I started learning about these things and how self-care is so important. And that's why I really started really leaning into that more and more as over the years as my coaching progressed. Physical symptoms, right, of emotional burnout could be like headaches, migraines. You might even have migraines, chronic fatigue, muscle tension. These are warning signs from our body. It's like that. If you ever had that, you ever heard the story of like the miners, how they would have like the canary, they would bring the canary into the mine with them. And when the canary stopped singing, that's when they knew that there was something wrong with the air quality. Well, it's the same thing with your body. Your body is sending you all of these signals, but if you're not paying attention to them, it's like your canary has stopped singing. It started, it was singing, it was fine, everything was good, but then all of a sudden you notice things were off, but you didn't do anything about it, and you just kept going on business as usual, and you started to ignore your own canary. So I just wanted to bring that analogy in because I really felt like for me, that's what was happening to me. I knew I was really stressed out. I was really super busy, as I've shared in my previous lives, many of them really, about my story around how recognizing that I was burning out, that I had all of these symptoms that started to not only emotionally manifest, but then to physically manifest, and recognizing that there had actually been signs leading up to it. But because I felt like, I'm in my 20s, I'm in the prime of my life, that there shouldn't be a problem. And so I recognized that and realized that, oh, okay, this is actual a burnout phase that I was going through when I look back. Again, hindsight is 2020, right? But that's why I want to bring these lives to you and really try to educate you around this, because I feel it's so important. We live in such a busy, crazy world. And if we don't make ourselves a priority, taking care of ourselves, we're going to be in these cycles of burnout. It'll become a normal way of life for us. So unaddressed emotional stress, of course, too, can lead to the physical symptoms. Again, as I was saying, what happened with me, and it creates a cycle where physical and emotional symptoms, they get worse and worse and worse over time. And it leads to that downward spiral where you're emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted. And again, you're in that cycle and it's on repeat over and over and over again. So I want to explain briefly the two sets of burnout I've been talking about. If you've been following me for a while, you know, I had previously, weeks ago, I had done a series around the 4 stages of emotional burnout. And then I also, previous to that, I had done a little bit of a series around the 4 stages of professional burnout. And I touched on them a bit. This week, last week, I was touching on them a little bit more especially when I was sharing some stories from women that I had talked to. I changed their name, of course, for privacy's sake, but those are their real stories. These are women who exist, who share stories with me and allowed me a little peek behind the curtains of, you know, what they experienced and what they did to cope and how they found themselves coming through it. Because again, it's a journey that you go through. It's not something that you can just completely ignore. So the signs of 4 stages of emotional burnout are really emotional overinvestment. This is where you're like that person who's giving of your time. You're investing a lot of your time and energy on someone in your life who is needing that support. Maybe even could be that energy drainer in your life who's constantly calling with the same story. And you are that person, the go-to person. A lot of the time this happens with the go-to people, that they end up over-investing their time and energy emotionally. And then you get into that emotional depletion where you really start to have your energy starts to drop and you have difficulty in managing your stressors. You become frustrated and irritated, maybe around things that probably would not have frustrated or irritated you in the past, but because you've been investing emotionally your time and your energy into either people or a certain person, that it just starts to get build up. And then you've got the third, which is that emotional exhaustion, where things really start to take a toll on you. You're exhausted all the time. Your emotions are stretched thin. You are increasingly getting more frustrated and irritated. You might even feel that you are detaching from your relationships, might even become emotionally numb. I explained in my, what happened with me is I did become, when I went through this, for the cycle of emotional burnout, which was a recent cycle for me, I found that I was becoming emotionally detached, emotionally numb to things around me. I became that person who was more of the glass half empty than the glass half full, which I'm always been that optimistic person, always looking at, you know, for the positive, looking for the solution rather than focusing on the problem. But because I was going through this cycle, it really was taking its toll on me. And then you get on full on breakdown, where you'll have maybe those breakdowns where you start to feel like you're losing, you know, control of everything in your life. You might even have frequent crying spells. I've shared for me that I couldn't cry. I tried. So for me, because I become so emotionally numb, it was like I had turned everything off and I couldn't tap into those emotions to get that relief. You might also become feeling like those hopelessness and feeling like you're alone. So that's like emotional burnout. And then you've got the professional burnout, which is 4 stages of professional burnout, or like the honeymoon stage. So this one is when you are in the midst, like I'll explain it this way. So say you're in the midst of whether you're, we'll talk about a creator. So someone who's creating something in their business and it's brand new and they're excited and they have energy to do it, and they really go at it and they forget to put in those breaks. Like self-care becomes less important to them because they're so excited about everything that they're forgetting that they need to actually take care of themselves by taking those breaks, by having still that hard stop, by having clarity around what they're focusing on, and they're not trying to do all the things. But that's the stage, the honeymoon stage, because you don't recognize this right away. But this is something to actually pay attention to, that if you're in the middle of something, at the beginning of something, and you're getting ready to start, you can start maybe thinking, oh, I need to make sure that along the way that I'm taking care of myself. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now, the stage 2 is the onset of stress. And this is where your enthusiasm starts to waver. You might experience like feeling tired or unfulfilled, which are like some mild symptoms of burnout. You might even deny that anything is wrong. And so those signs, like, you know, how I was talking about the canary for the miners, like, you know, if they ignored the sign that the canary stopped singing, their life was in danger. You know, they could have died, right? But the canary stopped singing. And this is just an analogy I'm using. but it's basically having your own canary inside you, where your canary stops singing, and that means that's for you to start paying attention to. Oh, something's wrong. What's going on? Something's off. I can tell you from experience, uh, even like from my own, like my burnout, one of my burnout phases back in 2017, I knew there was something wrong. It was my inner canary that was warning me that something was off. I couldn't figure it out at that time, and it took a little bit of time to figure it out, but I did take drastic steps and ended up changing locations of where I lived. I changed my job. I went, instead of being working for someone in the at the office full time, I became an independent contractor, and I'm still doing that today, but I'm supporting them as my first entrepreneurial journey. And so that was like, I had to take those drastic steps. My inner canary stopped singing, and I knew something was off. And the only way that I could do anything was really to do the one thing that I had control over, which was my time. And I really took a leap of faith and just basically jumped off the cliff, really, and trusted that I would have a net below me to land and catch me. So yeah, there was that. And then step 3 is chronic stress and burnout, which I told you is really where I believe the stage is where I ended up in my early 20s. And I ended up having that panic attack. And then my body started to physically manifest my physical stress, so the mental stress started to become physical. And then the last stage is stage 4, which is crisis and burnout syndrome, which is where you are this is where burnout is at. It's full on burnout. You can't do anything. You might even find yourself having to take time off work. If you're a business owner, if you don't have a team in place to support you, which one of the people that I know that I did have a market research call with, actually had to close down their brick and mortar for a few months to recover. So that's a loss of revenue. So it's just something to think about when you are in this. This is another burnout cycle. It's the professional side of it, right? It's all business related, but it's something for you to think about. And they do go together. They do have similarities. So one of the things I do want to point out before I go into the similarities and the differences is that when it comes to burnout, it can become a habit. It can become a habit where you constantly you find yourself doing the things and not paying attention and not allowing yourself the self-care that you need in order to be able to support yourself as you go along in your day-to-day. And so that can become a habit with you. You can go through either emotional cycles of burnout or professional cycles of burnout. They just become habitual because you are really just ignoring all the signs and allowing yourself to go through that path and not paying attention. If you don't become self-aware, you're never going to be able to get yourself out of those patterns. So it's really super important. So as I was saying, I wanted to talk a little bit about the similarities. So like thinking of stage 1 of the honeymoon phase versus the initial enthusiasm, idealism, a stage of the professional and emotional burnout. So you have like the honeymoon phase of professional burnout, and then you have the emotional overinvestment of emotional burnout. So they both reflect a period of high energy enthusiasm, because in the honeymoon phase, a professional burnout, again, there's excitement about the new, the challenges, the goals, and that could lead to overcommitting. Something's putting so much on your calendar that you feel like you're doing all of the stuff. And that's why it's really important to be very clear on your goals and how you're setting that up. Again, the early stage of emotional burnout might involve high emotional engagement, idealism, of course, where you feel deeply invested in your responsibilities to that person in your life that you need to if it's outside and it's personal, but it could also be professional as well. So you're deeply invested in your work and your responsibilities. That could also be emotionally over-investing without taking that time to step it back and take care of you. The difference is really between the two. The honeymoon phase of the professional burnout is really more about professional energy and excitement, while the emotional overinvestment for emotional burnout is really about where it's really where the stage you might not yet show the signs of strain, but it's more about emotional overinvestment, if that makes sense. So the stage 2, which of the professional burnout, is onset of stress. And then you've got stage 2 of emotional burnout, which is emotional exhaustion. So they both reflect the beginning of decline from the initial enthusiasm of what you're doing, of who you're supporting, if you will. In professional burnout, the onset of stress can begin as challenges to your stressors, right? Which can lead to the early signs of burnout. In emotional burnout, this is when emotional exhaustion sets in, and then it often manifests as being really super tired, feeling emotionally drained, and then of course this also can affect your professional, like your professional life. Onset of stress and professional burnout is really often driven by external work demands. So that's the external, which is really that's driving that. But the difference between that and the emotional depletion, I should say, the emotional depletion, I was saying emotional exhaustion, but it's actually emotional depletion, is where the burnout emotional burnout is really more about internal emotional fatigue, right? So there's the difference. You've got the external that's manifesting itself and driving that professional burnout, and then you've got the internal, the emotional part of it, which is that emotional fatigue. Now, stage 3 is chronic stress and burnout, which is the professional side, and then you've got emotional exhaustion, which is the emotional burnout side. So both stages, they reflect more serious decline in your well-being. Professional burnout, that's that chronic stress, at least emotional exhaustion, detachment, a sense of overwhelm. And then similarly, emotional burnout at this stage is characterized by deep emotional exhaustion, detachment from work even, or your personal life, and potentially a growing sense of hopelessness. The differences between these two stages, while they both involve emotional exhaustion, professional burnout is more closely tied at this stage to the workplace and might involve physical symptoms due to stress, whereas the emotional burnout side, the emotional exhaustion, can be more broader and affect all areas of your life. Now, the last stages of both the crisis and burnout syndrome, which is professional burnout, that's stage 4, and then the complete emotional breakdown, which is stage 4 for the emotional burnout. These stages, they both represent the most severe form of burnout. In the professional setting, this stage will involve the burnout, complete burnout, where functioning in your day-to-day life becomes really difficult. You might even have severe physical, even mental health issues start to emerge. And then emotional burnout, that's on the other hand, is similar, with a breakdown that might require like significant recovery time, even possibly intervention. So they really are similar. And I feel like they can be together at the same time, because if you're emotionally investing in work, in the people at work, even someone at work is really making you feel emotionally drained, these can go together. Now, the primary difference is that professional burnout might force a break from work specifically, right? While emotional burnout could lead to a more generalized breakdown. Again, it affects all aspects of your life. They're different, but they're similar. So the stages align in their progression, but emotional burnout can have a broader impact beyond just the professional context. The stages of emotional burnout are more about internal emotional states, while the stages of a professional burnout are often triggered by external workplace demands and stressors. So they do, they do overlap with each other, and they exacerbate the other. For instance, like emotional exhaustion can worsen professional burnout, and professional stress can intensify emotional burnout. So that's how they can affect each other. The point is, burnout is complex. It touches every facet of our lives, intertwining with our emotional and professional worlds in a way that can be really difficult for us to separate if we're not paying attention to the signs, our inner canary. Emotionally, burnout begins with a deep investment in our work, our responsibilities, and the people in our lives. We're fueled by a passion and desire to succeed. However, as the pressures and demands of our roles increase, this emotional investment really can lead to exhaustion, detachment, a loss of motivation. And then the emotional struggles, they don't just exist in isolation, right? Because they do often spill over into our professional lives. When we take our, a lot of the time we might find it hard to like switch it off when we go into work, and vice versa, to be able to switch it off when we get home from work. So again, it's just learning about yourself. Again, professionally, burnout starts with enthusiasm and energy, but as your stressors accumulate, the weight of your expectations, the pressure, it can really wear you down, leading to decreased performance, cynicism, physical symptoms, as I mentioned, headaches, muscle tension, even chronic fatigue. For me, as I said, I had hives. I even, going a step further in my story, I actually also developed an intolerance to lactose, which is milk products. So the connection really between the two, emotional and professional burnout, is intertwined. The emotional burnout piece can really drain our energy and our passions, making it really hard to meet our professional demands. And while our professional burnout can intensify feelings of emotional exhaustion and detachment. So that's why they intertwine. It's a cycle where each aspect feeds into the other, creating a situation where neither our personal well-being or our professional effectiveness is sustainable. So when it's really important that you recognize this, because it's going to allow you to address burnout holistically, understanding that improving your emotional health really is going to help you boost your professional resilience and vice versa. When you pay attention to both the emotional and the professional signs of burnout, you can take proactive steps to maintain balance, to prevent burnout from escalating, especially if you find yourself in a cycle, and then foster a healthier, more fulfilling lifestyle, both in your work and your professional life, and your personal life. So I have some reflective questions. I'm going to put them in the comments after the video, but really they're just about asking yourself questions around the signs of burnout that you could be overlooking, maybe stress, how it's impacting your emotional well-being, and also having you start to think about steps that you can take starting today to better balance your emotional health and your professional responsibilities to prevent burnout from escalating. So I wanted to, as I said, really bring that in to give you the similarities, the little bit of the differences, and also just to kind of make you start thinking like, oh, I have an inner canary. Maybe I actually, if you think about it, you could be thinking, oh, maybe I actually have had that happen to me where I felt like something isn't quite right and I can't put my finger on it. And so really taking that time to take notice and figure it out so that you can really get back on track and start living your life, having that quality of life. One more thing, I just want to make sure that if you are finding yourself that you need to know, what am I doing that's great, that's helping me self-care wise? What have I got that's really working well? And where are what are my strengths and what are my gaps? Like, what are some of the gaps, some of the things that I'm not paying attention to that maybe could support me better? So I wanted to offer to you that I do holistic balance and success audits around self-care, where you talk about your gaps, your strengths, and also suggestions for improvement around self-care. Like I give you your own personalized, detailed, not only a written report, but a video report to help you to figure out and find those hidden causes of what's going on in your life, the hidden things that you're missing, so that you become more self-aware and you start really leaning into your self-care more and prioritizing yourself. So I did go over a little bit today just because I wanted to talk about not only about both of them and how they have their differences, but their similarities and how they intertwine with each other for emotional burnout and professional burnout, so that you really start paying attention to where you're at, and especially if you're going through something. And again, I wanted to put that offer out there. If you are wanting to have your own self-care audit, please just message me here and below the video. Just send a message saying, hey, I want to I want to talk to you about this. Can we set up something where we have like a chat? So you can message me. For those of you who are watching on LinkedIn, just direct message me. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, just send me an email. You've got my email address, but I will tell it to you quickly. It's Leslie, Leslie at herextraordinarylifebydesign.co. So it's Leslie at herextraordinarylifebydesign.co. So definitely, and you'll see that is in the About section for you to get a hold of me. Anyways, thank you so much for listening in today, watching today. I hope that you found this valuable. And if you have any questions, please reach out. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. I'll see you again next week.